drivers will now have to undergo extra training in order to get their provisional license, thanks to a recent overhaul of the system announced recently by Transport Minister Rita Sarfiotti. This is to ensure that they will have greater driving experience before doing the practical driving assessment.
We're constantly taking on board research in this space and monitoring statistics, and we believe that by having students complete more practical driving under supervision ahead of the test, we'll have better test results and produce safer drivers. And the whole program is about producing safer drivers.
It all starts with the theory test. In the old system, 25 hours of supervised driving is done before doing the practical driving assessment, followed by another 25 hours before doing the hazard perception test.
Well, it's a much more straightforward process now. You sit your theory test, you then do 25 hours of supervised driving, and somewhere 6 months after you've done the theory test, you now do the hazard perception test. And the reason for that is a lot of evidence suggests that if you've done more practical driving, your cognitive recognition of risk is far greater, whereas if you do the hazard perception test earlier, then perhaps you don't really recognise the risks that you're encountering on the road. And then after the full 50 hours of supervised driving, you then sit the test and it brings the whole process to a conclusion. You then get your provisional driver's licence.
Well, as the President of the Professional Driver Trainers Association of WA, we totally support these changes. And in fact, a few years ago, we suggested to Transport that they should do what they are doing, which is move the hazard perception test and the driving test around as they are currently, as they're about to do.
We had declining pass rates. It's close to 60% of all applicants fail their first test, and that's a reflection on their lack of preparation. So we believe that by having twice as many supervised hours ahead of the test, it would expect there to be a higher pass rate. People have a much greater understanding of what it takes to be a competent driver.
Well, we're pretty confident that by adding the 50 hours of driving before they do their test, that they will be better drivers. But again, it depends on what sort of training they get, who actually takes them and what sort of conditions they're taught to do. In a lot of circumstances, we get the students when they've already done 25 hours as the current system is, and they've done 25 hours of driving to and from school. There's no depth to their driving, they don't go on freeways, they don't go outside of their comfort zone. That makes it tough. Until they get out and experience more driving conditions, we're thinking that the pass rate will probably stay the same. But again, it depends on how much they're prepared to practice and under the conditions they practice.
People just don't make the right level of commitment to getting the driving test. It's not a rite of passage. Preparing properly and learning to drive could well be the difference between living to have your 21st birthday and not having your 21st birthday, and we need the community to understand that.
It's difficult to say because we tend to get them after they've done many hours with their parents. First job we have is to break the bad habits that parents form, try and teach them good skills. I would think that the pass rate should improve, would be my opinion. I'm not sure that it'll improve by the 20% that Transport suggested, but at least we're trying.
Some driver and vehicle services centres have been reinforcing low pass rates. Could this be the reason that more learner drivers are failing their practical driving assessments?
That's actually a myth, Michael. We apply the same assessment criteria at every centre. What we have is very different demographics across our centres, and so quite often we have people that have done minimal supervised training, or in fact, as we referred to before, they've done their supervised hours with incompetent drivers, and therefore there's a higher fail rate. So nothing to do with this. It's quite a rigid framework. It's applied equally across the network.
There's definitely some assessors that look at things a bit differently, shall we say. They can be a bit tougher. It's like the interpretation of the Bible. I mean, everybody has their own interpretation of it. They all read the same book, but they all come out with a different interpretation. And I'm afraid that's the way it is with the driver training assessment procedure.
Yeah, we hear stories of fake logbooks, so that comes down to the responsibility of those involved, the parents and the students. We will address that in the period ahead. We're currently evaluating the introduction of electronic logbooks, which will provide great security around the process of supervised driving. It will also help us inform road safety decisions going forward. Those electronic logbooks are currently under development in a couple of other jurisdictions in Australia, and we're currently engaging with a number of providers.
Absolutely. Do as many driving hours as you can with the driving instructor. They've been trained for it. They have the car. They can take you out under varying conditions and much more safely. We can take you out on the dirt tracks, we can take you nighttime driving in a much safer environment where we have control and obviously have the experience that the general public don't.
There are very good driving instructors from parents. There's also those that aren't, so there's always that challenge that perhaps you learn your bad risks from your supervisor. So to some degree you've got to say to people, this is an investment in your future, so people should make decisions based on how important that is to them. And obviously we would support that they get supervised driving by very competent drivers. It's a difficult situation. You want people to be competent drivers, but if you actually insist that they can only be instructed by qualified driving instructors, not everybody can afford that. So it's about giving equity to the community, and if we were to enforce a financial burden on some people, it would prevent them from having access to the road system. The program will always evolve as we become more aware of safety issues and in fact driving conditions, but to actually fund compulsory driver training for everybody would be a massive burden on the community as a whole. And I think we're all fully aware of the government's financial position, so it's more about trying to encourage the community to be responsible and take the appropriate measures before they enter the driving system.
Well, as Steve has already said, I don't think that's really possible. It'd be too expensive, too much of a drain on government resources. But the best advice I have for everyone is save your money and take some lessons with qualified driving instructors.
If you want to get your provisional license, 50 hours of supervised driving is what you need. This is Michael Sir reporting for Undercurrent.